a hotel in the Deep South where lines were crossed and dreams were written.
It would not be unusual to just see Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. strolling.
A forgotten theater in Connecticut with a basement full of secrets.
What could this space have been for? Was this a space where they put unruly patrons?
And a Wyoming ghost town that captured the attention of the Queen of the Air.
When she could get away and be at peace, this was where she came.
Scattered across the United States are abandoned structures and those who know their stories. These forgotten ruins reveal the past of this land and its people. These are the secrets of hidden America. In the wilds of Wyoming, a settlement holds stories of elusive treasure, natural disaster, and one of the country's greatest pioneers.
This is real American wilderness. Civilization feels a very, very long way away.
We're in a valley that seems to go forever.
Your imagination here goes crazy when you think they lived way back here.
For the people who built these forgotten structures, the isolation was worth it.
A lot of East Coast folks who had money had heard that there was gold in the hills.
But this isn't just a ghost town from the American Old West.
There's something here that people did not expect to find.
This ruin hides a connection to one of America's best-known celebrities and one of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries.
They had just begun building her cabin, and man, it was going to be a spectacular place. And then she disappeared.
Tom Nave has been sharing this valley's secrets with people for years. He knows it's a journey worth taking.
It's just a lot of fun to have the excitement when folks come to Kerwin and the surrounding mountains here. It does my heart good.
This is the town of Kerwin. Around 150 years ago, it was a destination for those seeking their fortune in the mountains.
Gold and silver were discovered here in the 1880s, and it wasn't long before an entire mining town sprung up that reached about 200 people.
All of their boilers, their wheels, everything metal was brought in pieces by horse and wagon.
The fact that they got all of this mining machinery up here in wagons is just unbelievable. I mean, it's hard to drive up here now in a car.
Despite having a post office and hotel, Kerwin wasn't a typical 19th century mining boomtown. It had no brothels and no saloons, and zero tolerance for salacious behavior.
There was a palm reader known as Lucille that when they found out that she was providing more services than palm reading, they asked her to leave.
Newspapers were predicting the town's population would reach 1,000. But a natural disaster in 1907 would bring all this progress to a sudden halt.
Sitting at the base of 12,000-foot peaks, Kerwin was always in a precarious spot. And this year was a particularly heavy snowfall.
They had a severe avalanche that actually destroyed a store and a house and killed 3 people.
The remaining residents had to make a snap decision: leave with rescue crews or risk another disaster. So they all left.
The exodus marked the end of Kerwin as a mining town, but not the end of Kerwin altogether. 6 miles further down the valley, there is a collection of cabins hidden amongst the trees that put this place back on the map and forever tied it to a world-famous name.
It shrunk. This place, when I was a kid, it was 3 times bigger than this.
Byron Bennett has fond memories of a childhood spent living in this unique spot.
I was 4 years old when I moved up here. I'd be here for the weekends or as long as I could. Oh, it was pretty neat. The balcony up there, when I was a little kid, I could look down over there and it was big.
Byron's family managed this ranch and lived in the lodge, while the surrounding cabins were for visitors who had traveled hundreds of miles to be here. But they weren't hunting for gold like their predecessors. They were in search of something else.
By the end of the 19th century, there's this real mystique that's built up about the Old West.
Go west, young man. Go west. If you want a life crowded with adventure, go west. Or if you want solitude, go west.
People who had never set foot outside of a city saw pictures of cowboys and horses in magazines, and they saw their stories being told in silent Western films, and they wanted some of that.
The cowboys capitalized on this, and so they started building ranches which were targeted to wealthy East Coasters who wanted to come out and play cowboy for a while.
Real cowboys called these urbanites dudes, and this place was the Bennett family Dude Ranch.
We'd take horseback rides up to Kerwin and down the river to some other fishing place where they could fish. And then a lot of times the people just liked the dudes would kind of sit around and just do nothing.
In 1934, this ranch hosted a visitor like no other.
She was one of the most famous women in the world and was in high demand for press tours and speaking events.
She drives her Franklin automobile all the way from New York straight to Wyoming, right up to the gates of the ranch.
When she arrived, the natural beauty of Kerwin would captivate her. But soon after, she would disappear into thin air. In an isolated valley in western Wyoming, first settled by gold miners, a dude ranch was about to play host to a true American icon.
We're coming up on cabin number 3, they call it. This is where Amelia Earhart really fell in love with this part of the country.
Amelia stayed in this cabin for 3 weeks in the summer of 1934.
This was quite a location. I guess you could call this her back porch. And it gets even a little louder, the creek out here. This is why you come. This is why she was here.
Amelia Earhart's connection to Wyoming is a lesser-told chapter of this incredible woman's story. Before she came here, Amelia had already experienced Wyoming from the air.
Most people will know of Amelia Earhart from her attempt to fly around the globe, but what a lot of folks don't know is that she was involved with piloting an experimental helicopter known as an autogyro.
In 1931, 3 years before she first came to Kerwin, Amelia wanted to set a transcontinental record in the craft and made 5 stops in Wyoming, gathering huge crowds at each airfield.
Over the next few years, Amelia Earhart set a dizzying array of flight records, and she became one of the most famous women on the planet.
At the height of her fame, Earhart needed somewhere to escape the spotlight.
The paparazzi of that time following you around. When she could get away and be at peace, this was where she came.
The owner of the ranch at this time was named Carl Dunrud.
Carl Dunrud was a local guide for East Coast elites. That's how he met George Palmer Putnam, Amelia Earhart's promoter and later her husband.
They went on some rather exotic trips together, and I'm sure that how it happened was, why don't you come and spend some time at the Double D Ranch? D being Dunrood's last initial.
Earhart knew of Wyoming from her flying career, and she loved the great outdoors, so when Putnam mentioned Dunrood's ranch, she didn't need much convincing.
They spent this great summer fishing and riding and exploring this weird old mining town. You totally can understand how she fell in love with it.
But Amelia wasn't done with her daredevil lifestyle. There was still one major flying record that she was determined to break.
Amelia Earhart was a true pioneer. She was fearless and she took on incredible challenges. But this attempt to circumnavigate the world was her most ambitious.
On June 1st, 1937, she took off from Miami, Florida, with navigator Fred Noonan on a route that would take them 29,000 miles around the world.
On June 29th, they reached New Guinea with only 7,000 miles to go, and the entire world is waiting with bated breath for her to finish the flight.
Meanwhile, Carl Dunrood was busy fulfilling a promise he had made to Amelia and her husband when they were last in Kerwin.
They got to know Carl Dunrood really well, and she actually contracted with Carl to build her a cabin about a mile up above Kerwin.
But before Amelia could begin dreaming of a quiet life in Kerwin, she had a record-breaking journey to complete and was facing the most difficult stretch yet.
This leg was going to be the longest, more than 2,500 miles to a tiny atoll in the middle of the Central Pacific. They never made it.
This was such a big deal that President Roosevelt himself authorizes a search of over 250,000 miles of sea.
After 2 weeks, the search was abandoned. Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan were lost.
There have been plenty of rumors about what happened, but this is one of America, if not the world's, most enduring mysteries.
The news eventually made its way to Carl Dunrood in Kerwin.
They had just begun that, literally had 4 or 5 logs up going around, and she disappeared and they stopped building.
Her cabin lies frozen in time, a monument to a great woman and a dream unrealized.
There's nothing but remnants to see today, but you can kind of feel that she's there.
Despite its far-flung location, people still make the difficult journey to Kerwin today.
Lots of people drive out to this remote mountain area because it's an opportunity to feel close to one of the greatest American legends of all time.
Kerwin's buildings are slowly deteriorating. But as Amelia Earhart herself experienced, the magic of this place doesn't lie in the man-made.
We feel very fortunate to have these mountains in our backyard, and I can tell you it never gets old.
This is my final resting place. My ashes are going to be out here.
In the Deep South, one building offered safe haven to the stars and played host to the man who had America's most famous dream.
It was packed. The music was superb. You felt as if you were a part of something larger than yourself.
When you think of a city that has changed American society in the 20th century, there are few that outshine Montgomery, Alabama.
Less than half a mile from the state capitol, an abandoned building seems out of place.
What's crazy is that we're just 2 blocks from downtown Montgomery. This is prime real estate. Why has it been left to rot like this?
What jumps out to me is the top floor. I'm willing to bet there might have been some type of penthouse with some special purpose.
Inside, rooms hold memories of conversations that sparked a nationwide revolution.
It is just amazing to think about the historical people that sat in these exact same seats, where they discussed the bus boycotts, the marches.
When you tell the story of Black history in America, this place cannot become a mere footnote. This place must be a full-length chapter.
In Montgomery, Alabama, this rundown building has been a cornerstone in Richard Bailey's life.
Every day of my school years, I passed this place. This was the heart of the Black community. You felt a certain closeness, a certain kinship with the other patrons.
Yet while this structure brought people together, it was born out of a divided America.
In the 1950s, American society was largely segregated between Black and white.
These rules were also enforced when African Americans traveled across the nation.
If you were an African American traveling from point A to point B, there was a police brutality, bigotry, and all sorts of instances of second-class citizenship.
To ensure Black travelers had somewhere to rest their heads, a list of safe havens were published in a guide called the Green Book.
It was a book that listed all of the safe places for African Americans to go, to eat, to sleep, to stay.
This 28-room guest house was listed as a safe place for travelers to stay in Montgomery. This is the Ben Moore Hotel. Today, Edward Davis is its custodian. He grew up hearing about the extra measures taken during its construction in 1951 to ensure its patrons' safety.
The Ben Moore Hotel was supposed to withstand fire, high flames, up to 2 hours. This was known as the fireproof hotel, just in case someone tried to do a hate crime.
But while bedrooms provided somewhere safe to sleep, the top floor offered far more.
The Afro Club was located on the 4th floor.
It was a Black nightclub with folks drinking, dancing, smoking, and having an honest, safe, good time.
The Afro Club attracted some of the biggest names in the business: B.B. King, Tina Turner, and Clarence Carter.
Even with A-list names in the house, the patrons of the Afro Club had to be wary of the dangers posed by a segregated America.
When you came into the Afro Club, you would have to buy your tickets right here, and then you get to this big 4-inch thick door with the double bolted action, the deadbolt, and the peephole in case you had someone that wanted to attack people.
This door didn't just protect the building's patrons at night. This space served another purpose during the day, playing a leading role in changing America.
Some of the biggest legends in the history of the civil rights movement held meetings right here.
They'd come up here because it was the only building with a skyrise downtown back in the 50s. And if you wanted to check for maybe police cars coming, you had a clear view of the entire city.
The leader of the Montgomery NAACP branch, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, E.D. Nixon, held his meetings here.
E.D. Nixon was what you would call a power player. He was a playmaker, a change agent.
One of the meetings he organized here was the first of its kind in American history.
On February 23rd, 1955, a month before the city election, every white candidate came to the Ben Moore Hotel to answer questions from African Americans. The fact that these white office holders would dare come to a black hotel and answer questions from the black population, 1955, that was unthinkable.
Despite over half of the city's population being black, decades of disenfranchisement legislation had led to few having the right to vote. But many factors, such as increasing literacy levels, meant more African Americans were passing voter eligibility tests.
The point of the matter is, they had to come because candidate A wanted to make certain that candidate B did not get all of the black votes.
This meeting at the Ben Moore Hotel was only the beginning of a revolution that was starting to sweep the country. These rooms were pivotal in the life of an American legend whose dream changed the futures of millions.
He didn't know the value at the time of those speeches.
In the 1950s, the Ben Moore Hotel was the heart of Montgomery, Alabama's African American community. But it was more than just a guest house, nightclub, and meeting place for civil rights leaders.
This is the Majestic Cafe. It's the first floor of the Ben Moore Hotel.
The Majestic Cafe served Southern food to hotel patrons and the public alike. But among the hundreds who ate here, one name stands out.
It would not be unusual to just see Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stroll into the Majestic Cafe for whatever reason, maybe just to talk with someone. This building was located so close to his home, it became a part of his existence.
In fact, one of the most iconic photographs of Dr. Martin Luther King was taken right outside.
Like other civil rights leaders of the time, Martin Luther King held his meetings at the top of this building. But perhaps one of the most unassuming rooms in the hotel left the biggest mark on his legacy.
Dr. Martin Luther King, many times, would venture into the barbershop, and as he was awaiting his turn for a haircut, he would sit there and scribble.
Martin Luther King wrote some of his speeches while sitting in the barber's shop.
So some of the most seminal moments of the civil rights movement and some of the most powerful ideas to emerge from that happened right here.
But in an ironic twist of fate, the success of the speeches written within these walls brought about the end of the building.
On July 2nd, 1964, all the hard work and meetings at the Ben Moore Hotel finally bear fruition. Congress passes the Civil Rights Act, officially ending segregation in the U.S.
Desegregation led to the slowing of a clientele within the Ben Moore Hotel. Numbers of African American travelers began to go to formerly white establishments in order to have a new experience or to have better amenities.
As customers dwindled, in the 1970s, this hotel closed its doors for the final time. Today, the hotel is owned by Edward and his family. And while it remains locked, there is hope it won't always be this way.
I want people to remember their history. I want people to come back in, sit in the same seats where civil rights leaders sat.
If it's ever restored, I would feel very proud. I think on that day, Black people, white people, citizens of Alabama will have another opportunity to smile as a generation before us once did.
In the heart of the Constitution state lies a building founded in regional rivalry, which both entertained and detained its audience.
I get a special feeling every time I come in here. Every time we would stop here, people were blown away because they didn't understand what was here.
We're in Derby, which is Connecticut's smallest city.
It's got that old world charm with nice big houses, a town green with a bandstand.
This isn't the kind of place where you'd find abandoned buildings, but the eye is drawn to the largest building on the square.
The polished facade of this structure hides an interior of bygone glory.
Why is this building renovated on the outside but not the inside? Makes you think that someone is trying to hide something.
When you look inside the basement, you see doors, cells, and offices. What could this space have been for?
It's so interesting because some of it looks like people were just here yesterday. It really feels like walking into a piece of history.
There are lots of rumors about this place. Some even say that it's haunted. Now, I don't believe in hauntings, but it turns out that the truth is possibly even more spooky.
Jack Walsh's family has lived in this valley for generations, and he knows every inch of this building.
This was the dressing area. They would put up the posters that they used to advertise the plays, and these are still here. They've survived. I would have loved to have seen them in their heyday.
Derby is in the Naugatuck Valley where two rivers come together, and this was really important in the Industrial Revolution because several mills sprung up here.
These mills manufactured everything from hoop skirts to corsets to brass items and pianos.
As the valley boomed, a local rivalry developed between Derby and the nearby borough of Ansonia. A conflict well known to lifelong resident Kelly Santiago.
Derby and Ansonia are friendly, and it's more of a friendly rivalry, a fun competition with the sports teams.
But over 100 years ago, one-upmanship between these neighbors would change the face of Derby.
In 1870, Ansonia, which was then a borough of Derby, built a grand opera house just 2 miles up the road.
Well, not to be outdone, Derby decides it's got to build its own opera house, and they name it after a local piano manufacturer.
This is the Sterling Opera House.
Many of these types of structures were built in the 19th century. They're essentially theaters, but they're called opera houses because of the popularity of musical entertainment. Things like light opera or comic opera.
That was its big claim to fame, was that there wasn't a bad seat in the house, that everywhere in the Sterling was a perfect seat.
These seats saw a number of stars come here in the early 20th century.
We saw all kinds of celebrities come through here. Bing Crosby, Bob Hope, Amelia Earhart came here in the 30s and gave a speech in front of the Women's Club.
The Sterling Opera House entertained locals for decades, but entertainment was not this building's only purpose.
The Sterling Opera House was a multi-use facility. So we're in the entertainment section, and then we're going to go to the basement. I'm going to call that the safety level.
Why would you have jail cells underneath a theater? Were they locking up unruly patrons?
In a sleepy Connecticut town lies a theater which attracted some of entertainment's brightest stars. But below the stage lies a strange, bureaucratic underworld.
This grand, beautiful building was an icon for the town of Derby, but it was also a very expensive icon, so it had to serve double duty.
We're on the main floor, which was actually City Hall. So this is the heartbeat of city government. The mayor had an office next door, the tax collector and the director of charities.
Beneath the abandoned City Hall lies another, much darker level.
These are the jail cells. I think this could have been a nice form of crime deterrent, because take a look at this. If you spent one night in this jail cell with this elegant toilet, I don't think you'd ever want to come back.
These dungeons once held some unique criminals when they were operated as Derby Police Department's holding cells.
The same prosperity that brought the theater to the valley also brought another thing: organized crime.
The Black Hand was a type of extortion racket that was introduced to the United States by immigrants from southern Italy.
This was a group of people who would write letters and extort people. They would write to rich people, often rich Italian Americans, and they would say, bad things are going to happen to you unless you give us some money.
They would send a letter with the Black Hand on the letter. And if you got that letter, your life changed dramatically, because you were under threat.
Connecticut's large Italian-American population made it a hotbed for these schemes, and a number of Black Hand extortionists were held within these cells. While this town would eventually overcome the Black Hand, it would not weather natural disaster quite as well.
We've had floods at different points in our history, but the worst one was in 1955. And it came as a result of 2 hurricanes in a short period of time.
Nearly 50 lives have been lost, and for many thousands of people, the catastrophe has been like a nightmare come true.
It basically wiped out the downtown area of Derby. We had coffins washed down from the cemetery, which got hung up on the bridge.
Rumor has it that after the flooding, the city hall was actually used as a morgue, so you would have bodies stored beneath the theater, and maybe that's where the rumors of haunting come from.
While Derby was able to clean up after the floods, the Sterling Opera House was already on its last leg. The theater struggled to make a profit in the 1940s and hosted fewer and fewer performances. The final nail in the coffin for this building came in 1965, when City Hall moved out and the building closed for good. Today, the Sterling Opera House remains empty, but has not been forgotten.
Over the time since it's closed, there's been so many efforts to try and revitalize this building. In the late 1990s, the mayor then was able to secure a grant to do some work to the outside of the building.
The path to restoring the interior could be long, but it would certainly benefit this small city.
Well, yeah, I'd love to see it restored to a theater. Wouldn't it be fantastic to come in here and see some of the people, see them perform in person in an acoustically perfect building?
On Florida's Gulf Coast, a bizarre monument hints at a community erased from the landscape.
There's a lot of stories floating around about it. It's associated with ghost stories, with pirates.
So here we are on the outskirts of Tampa. It's this flat space, single-level homes.
In a wedge between 2 highways, there's this unassuming little green park, except it has one towering landmark.
Sticking 200 feet into the air above the treetops is a gleaming white tower.
It's too far from the coast to act as a lighthouse, and it doesn't seem to be defensive. Is it just for show?
It looks almost medieval, like something the Crusaders would have built. if they'd had reinforced concrete.
To make it even more intriguing, the door is bolted up, but there does seem to be a way inside, and that would be from a rope that's dangling from the lowest window.
What was once a beacon for tourists became one man's doomed gamble.
He mortgaged every one of his assets for one grand design, but would it pay off?
On the outskirts of Tampa, Florida, the history of a forgotten community is locked away in an imposing white tower. Museum director Norma Robinson has been unearthing a lost neighborhood.
Coming to this community, wherever you looked, you saw the tower.
This tower was meant to preside over a little empire. Unfortunately, the creator never lived to see it come to completion.
This is the Sulphur Springs Tower. Nearby, more clues to the area's history flow past.
A young man told us that his grandmother used to make him come and get the water, and he said it smelled terrible, but she said it kept her young.
Legends of the local spring water stretch back hundreds of years.
At the turn of the century, a small resort business had sprung up on the land, with a pool and a few bathhouses, all fed by the spring.
But one man entered the scene with ambitions for a far more lucrative venture and an appetite for risk.
Josiah Richardson was a real American type. He was a land developer, a realtor, and loved to sell the public on his big dreams. One of his favorite slogans was, "Josiah knows where the money grows."
Josiah Richardson buys the site in 1904 and immediately sets about to developing it.
From the pictures we see, this was a public beach. You could see they had a diving board and a water slide.
In a short time, the humble resort transformed into a bustling tourist destination, one that catered to a specific local taste.
This being Florida, it even had an alligator farm where kids could ride something called a gatormobile, quite literally a small cart pulled by an alligator.
They had a fascination about them back there. You could buy alligators in Maeve's department stores.
The centerpiece of Richardson's resort was a groundbreaking building stretching an entire city block.
It was listed in Guinness's World Records as the first mini mall in Florida. It was a place where you could go and do all your shopping.
At one time, this was known as Tampa's very own Coney Island.
As Richardson developed all this, he had one problem, kind of ironically, is they needed a better supply of water. So he commissioned a very ambitious project.
In the late 1920s, Richardson set out to build his resort a dedicated water tower. To see it realized, he risked everything he had built at Sulphur Springs.
So how is he going to fund all of this? Well, he uses everything he has, but he also mortgages the entire property, the arcade, everything, in hopes that this is going to work out.
The result was this stunning 214-foot tall Gothic Revival tower built over an artesian well.
In a sense, the water tower's design was a bit of a representation of Richardson's flamboyant kind of huckster personality. You couldn't miss it. You're going to see my water tower from all the way across town.
Over-leveraged and under financial pressure, Richardson couldn't risk anything going wrong. But in 1929, just 2 years after the tower's completion, a number of things went very wrong. First, the New York Stock Exchange crashed.
The Depression was getting worse. People couldn't afford to travel. The visitors, who were the lifeblood of this resort, their numbers dwindled.
Then, as the summer season came to a close, dark clouds formed on the horizon for Sulphur Springs.
In September 1933, at the beginning of the hurricane season, a storm started gathering out in the Gulf, and rain started pouring down on Tampa.
After days of heavy rain, the dam on the Hillsborough River fails, and water just gushes over the entire property.
This deluge of water washed out bridges, damaged roads. A lot of people had to evacuate.
The tenants and shopkeepers that filled Richardson's buildings fell behind on their rent, and his immense mortgage caught up with him.
There's an expression in finance that you're underwater if your debts exceed your ability to pay them back. Well, Richardson was underwater in more ways than one.
Richardson was forced to sell everything and watched his empire carry on from the outside until his final days. The tower continued to operate as a private water company until 1971, when it was finally shut down. Pieces of Sulphur Springs were sold off or demolished over the next 10 years, until few traces remained of this tourist empire. At Sulphur Springs, this ambitious water tower outlasted its creator and his resort.
Richardson really made sure this thing was built to last. We had these mighty steel pillars buried inside the concrete. That thing isn't going anywhere.
It's a structure that has a lot of history that connects not only to the neighborhood, but just to people concerned about living and growing a community. So I believe that's one of the things you could be proud of.